to get to optimal. So now I thought it'd be interesting to share with you guys a use case. So we are one of the things we do is we support customers and cardholders that are trying to buy fuel. And as you can imagine, there's different rules by different conditions. And we have one very large customer that when those cardholders call, they want us to treat that experience completely different than everybody else. So it's an edge case. And the way to think about this is you're an associate and you're taking calls, and about 2 in 100 calls are this edge case. And we have in the past done training and coaching, and literally would make people take training monthly to be reminded about this very special situation. Now, even doing that, we had a lot of complaints. We also, frankly, have some friction with hold times because we end up trying to do this specialized service in small groups instead of one big group that's enabled and empowered to do specialized service across a bigger pool. So this is just a quick screenshots of this work we've done where, this is a 4-step process. It's not really rocket science. However, because it's so different than everything else the associate does, it creates that expertise. And you can have all these different variables really well kind of thought out and almost scripted. Now, what I'll say is what's behind the scenes is we've learned that we can collect data at each of these milestones. And we've learned, again, kind of embarrassing to some degree, we know how long it takes to authenticate. And by the way, it takes too long. So that's something if we do, we grab 200,000 calls and we know it takes us a lot of time to authenticate, we can actually go fund improving that. We could fund maybe some artificial intelligence. What Paul talked about earlier was triaging. When you have this level of data, it's almost like helps you with that roadmap of where to start in the journey that we all want, which is, artificial intelligence and automation and all that. So think of this as maybe foundational to help guide you through that journey. So that is our experience with expert service. I'll leave you with an invite to happy to talk offline about this. I'll just share Alan and Paul. The last session I met a couple people offline and I learned a few things from them. So thank you for this forum, because I really appreciate the networking and connections that you provide.
Wow, thank you, Todd. I appreciate that. And so glad to have you here sharing some of those edge cases and the way that you speak about how our jobs are going to get more complex because we are replacing automation with those easier things. And so we've got to get really good at doing this and dealing with this. So folks, we've got 5 minutes here. And I'd love for you to add your questions in the chat. Now, we might not be able to get to all the questions. This is where, Todd, we call you the big fish, okay? And everyone's going to submit bait. So the bait is their questions in the chat, and you actually get to pick which questions you want to answer. Now, we will take all of your questions and put them in our LinkedIn group, and I will give you a link to our LinkedIn group so you can join that and get into the conversations there. So let me go ahead and post that. But as we watch these questions rolling in, Todd, feel free to jump into some of these.
Let me grab one right here. How did you get top-down buy-in on the Lori approach? Well, I guess I am the top because I didn't ask for permission, right? I think, like I said earlier, everybody has a Lori. You may have to have another gatekeeper, right? But she just happens to be somebody that we trust implicitly. And frankly, if I went to my boss, they would all agree.
If we could build on that, Todd, if someone was trying to get that approval with you, how would you recommend they go about doing that?
So I would probably, because I would say, okay, that sounds like a really great idea because it creates, efficiency. However, let's talk about what are their blind spots. And I would say yes, if we had some protection against blind spots. I would say yes, if we had protection against some risk elements that maybe the person may not be familiar with, right? So that's how I would approach it.
Cool. Awesome. You've got two other questions in there. Feel free to keep the questions coming, folks. We do have a few minutes. And then I just posted the LinkedIn group.
So when do you decide to move something from minimally viable to optimal product? That's a great question. I mean, I think if you ask my team, they would tell you they're never satisfied. So I'm not sure I can tell you this, we don't have a formal process that says, okay, it went from minimally viable to optimal and we're never going to look at it again. I think what happens is as something becomes optimal, it just falls lower, lower, lower in your priority list or roadmap. That's how I think about it.
And Bradley's question actually dovetails off what you're speaking about. So maybe we hit that and go back to Timothy. But he said, I constantly run into the tension between MVP and minimum valuable product. How do you introduce the minimum amount of change to move forward while making sure creating progress and tying to your overall vision? Otherwise, 100 disconnected MVPs create a very disjointed client experience ecosystem.
That's a good one. So the way we have done the roadmap or prioritization is we've done ranking on things like compliance and risk is number 1, revenues number 2, associate experience is number 3, expense management's number 4. We've kind of done that ranking, and I really don't know how to know if it's minimally viable and good enough, but because this is live, associates use it all the time, every day. Right now, there's people using these tools. We kind of know right away. Somebody raises their hand and like, hey, this isn't working. We also have the data on the back end, and the data on the back end at the end of every journey says, did I help the customer, yes or no? Of course, we do voice of customer surveys, but I think it's super helpful to self-evaluate every interaction. And if there's a bunch of no's, there's the missing part. So that's how we think about it.
Awesome. And then lastly, Timothy said, what was the process of building these workflows into your CRM?
Yeah, so we use Salesforce, and Salesforce has a thing called flows, and we love Salesforce, but we don't love Salesforce for flows because it's slow, it requires releases, it requires, in my org, a lot of bureaucracy of time. So we are integrating this tool inside of Salesforce. So if something changes today, we can make the change and it's released today. I don't have to wait for the next Salesforce release. My Salesforce team doesn't like it. They want to put everything in flows. So there are likely, as this thing matures, some things will be built out in flows because it's like hardened and doesn't change, and other things will be more dynamic.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you, Todd. Appreciate that. And this presentation, we do need to move on. So folks, if you do have more questions, of course, you can post those questions to the LinkedIn group. Oh, you know what, Todd, I can't, we answered all the questions except for one. So we do need to actually answer this question.
Okay.
We can't leave them out, that's unacceptable. So what have you learned about complex learning that has not worked?
Oh, well, complex learning that has not worked. So what I can tell you doesn't work is you set somebody in a room with a PowerPoint and a person at the screen, and it's not interactive. So just kind of what I think of as super traditional learning or training, where it's one-sided, a speaker does all the delivery, the consumer just sits there and like a sponge. That doesn't work. We try to chunk things out. We try to do interactive things. We try to do like role playing. And by the way, using these experience trees makes it super easy to role play because you don't have to like remember what to do. You can just follow the screen. That's a great question, but that's my thinking is the traditional manners, the more complex, the less it works.
Beautiful. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, which is hard to do though. Very, very hard to do. Awesome, Todd. Thank you again. High fives.